this session.
We find last week's recording.
I will show you. So this will be on this week's recording. They'll always go to the same place. So I'm going to share my screen now that I can. And on our store page in Sock Club info, we are doing Sock Club 2.0. So click on that. That will take you to the Sock Club 2.0 Everyday Sock. And just like we did last time, I sort of start at the top and then build as we go. The video for the Sock Club kickoff, I think I put it up a couple days after class last week, but
Okay.
That's where it is.
Maybe
So
I look soon.
Did you want to say something? So if you need to go back and look at the cast on again, that's where the video is.
Right.
Okay.
And then we have these were the actual foot lengths. So these are all of the sizes with the actual foot lengths that those sizes represent.
Right.
And these are the Flegel heel lines that we were drawing so many inches from our heel. These were the total number of cast on stitches, obviously divided in half, or I mean, that's how many wraps we were doing. We would have this, sorry, the total number of wraps was half of this number. And then we had toe increase rounds, and then you were increasing until you had this many foot stitches.
Right.
So in step one, oh, I thought I had rewritten this. I think maybe I got interrupted while I was rewriting this. It was pointed out to me a couple of days after class that if you begin on a knit one, then you end.
Oh, these are.
It doesn't necessarily come out, and so my math was wrong for this instruction. So we'll address that in the class tonight. Any other questions about the page?
Okay, so if the page tells you, like you go 3.5 inches from the
pattern told us this actually.
That we go by that, not where our line was for our ankle bone.
Natalie, the ankle bone measurement was for the fish lips heel kiss. And so last week we did a second line that was further away from the heel. That was one of these measurements. So if you're doing, for example, the women's medium, your line would be 3 inches and a quarter from the heel, from the end of the heel.
And if it's doing a large, it's 3.5.
And if you're doing a women's large, it would be 3.5.
Okay, I have that line and I have the other line. I go by the 3.5 inch from the end of the heel.
So you want to be at the 3.5 from the end of the heel today.
Okay. Well, I'm not, but.
Okay. Ingrid, you made a face.
Oh, now I finally understand where my lines were. I was reading the fish lips thing and how to do the foot.
So that we wanted the fish lips heel kiss for how to make the cardboard cutout, but we are not doing that sock.
Okay.
Not at this time, but now you have it if you ever want to do it. And if we ever want to do that sock, we've already got the pattern. But Pam had shared with me how helpful this cardboard cutout was. And I thought it would be very helpful, especially if you didn't want to do your own foot, that this would be a helpful way of doing it for an other person. Okay. So I made a mistake and was wrong. And I am telling you here at the beginning of class that I made a mistake and I was wrong about dividing the stitches so that you started on a knit one, so you'd end on a knit one. It didn't work out with the math. No. So who did that? Anybody? Did anybody do it? Natalie, did you start with a knit?
I started with a knit one and ended with a knit one.
And then on the next row, how many stitches do you have on each needle?
I have one needle.
That's
You're-
why you're
I'm-
doing a circular needle. That's why it worked out for you.
And I put a marker at the halfway point, and that's a purl.
Right. So I have screwed you up.
I thought it worked out fine.
Yep, it does work out fine because it's it's still an even number of stitches. So on your small circular needle, it works out just peachy. However, when we go into the next section of making increases in pattern, I will have screwed you up a little bit.
Okay.
I apologize. So
You'll tell me how to correct it.
I will
I
tell you how to correct it. So you're doing a women's size medium.
Large.
The second thing, large, sorry.
Mhm.
So the second thing that turned up in the first class is that everybody hadn't read the instructions for content. So I'm going to just go over part of the instructions here, and I am going to go ahead and highlight my screen, spotlight for everyone, so you can all follow along with me. So under the toe, this was our cast on, and so we're up here, we cast on however many stitches. If you're making the women's medium, that was 28 stitches on each needle. Sorry. Nope, that was 28 stitches total, 14 on each needle. If you're making the large, it's 32 and 16 on each needle. And I think those are the only two sizes that people are currently doing that I know of. Anybody doing anything else? So, and we used the cast on, and then we started increasing, and she gave the instructions for increasing and said, knit one, make one left or make one right. And we talked about whether or not we wanted to switch that to a knit in the front and the back. And that was an option that I gave you. And you'll increase 4 stitches in a round each time. And then she said, repeat these 2 rounds. So a round of plain knitting and then a round with increases at each edge on both needles or both halves. And then you repeat those a further so many times depending on your size. So 7 times for the women's medium, 8 times for the women's large. And that means a total of, and here's where people had a mistake, a total of 32 stitches increased for a total number of stitches of 60 to 68 or 68, depending on your size again. Several people read this as until there were 32 stitches. And so we had a number of people in the other class who had 64 stitches on their 2 needles or on their needles and not 60 or 68. Is there anybody here for whom that happened? Because I just need to know it for Thank you, Ingrid.
Well, I was thinking like 32 stitches on each needle, so that made 64.
Right.
So I was confused.
It's okay. I did not realize that that was something that was confusing, but now we know. So you should have had 32 increases to make a total of 60 stitches or 30 on each needle. Which means, I guess, that you increased 1 more time.
I did, yes.
Okay, that's fine. So what we're going to do is you're going to do the increases for the heel gusset as written, but you won't do the last one
Okay.
because you already have done that one. But we want to start increasing sooner than later because you don't want your heel to like gather up on the front of your foot. Because it's too long and it's not starting to increase. So that was something we found out in the earlier class that I just want to share. Is there anybody else other than Ingrid for whom that is the case? You're not alone.
Okay.
There were a bunch of you. All right, so everybody now either has 60, 64, or 68 stitches, correct? And you have knitted until your sock fits down to your Flegel heel. So I'm just going to demonstrate that. I'm going to put my sock on my Flegel heel, on my cutout. And you just pull it down. They will bend. The cutouts will bend as you go. So I have, there we go. That's what it looks like when you try it on. Has anybody done this? All right. So at the bottom, you can see that I am at least 2 inches away from my Flegel heel shaping. So I am going to demonstrate and then I'm going to rip it back because I'm not done yet. So it's nice because you can see that this, I'm making this for my husband. This is his foot cutout and it's stretchy on the cutout. So I feel like this is going to be a nice size for him. It makes me feel good using this cardboard cutout for somebody else because I feel like I have a good sense that it will fit him. Okay, the next thing I want to say is I had a question in the first class about top needle versus bottom needle. And the top needle at this point is going to represent the top of your foot, as well as being the top needle from our cast on. The top needle will now represent the top of your foot. So here in the pattern, it talks about working the established pattern. So that means working in the ribbing as established. So for Natalie, are you raising your hand?
No.
Okay. For Natalie, I was actually talking to Ingrid, but for Natalie, your round begins with a knit one.
Right. Knit
What
one
is
and
Okay, so you just want to count over, and you're making the women's medium,
large.
women's large. So you want to count over 34 stitches and place a second marker.
Okay. Which I,
Do you have a
Okay.
halfway marker?
Right.
Sorry?
34 is halfway.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a marker there. I've been just keeping it there.
Okay, so if the top needle for the pattern is the top of the foot, it's the first half of the round for you. So I placed a visible marker on
Oh,
that
good.
half.
Okay.
So I would recommend if you are working magic loop or double point or small circular, I would recommend using some visual marker for the top half of your stitches so you don't get confused, because the increases we're about to do are only done on the bottom half of the foot.
I have a question. You had said something about, I know you were talking to Natalie. I also started, because I'm using just a single circular needle. So my round starts with a knit one.
Okay,
So
so
since I'm
count
doing,
off, are you doing 30 or 34 stitches?
I'm doing
Medium or
30.
large?
I'm doing 30.
Okay, so count off 30 stitches and make sure that you have
Another marker.
another marker at the halfway point, and then put a marker on the side that is, so that you know which one is the top and which is the bottom of the foot.
Right. I'm gonna go grab another marker.
Okay. So I want to demonstrate the make one left and right, and then I'm going to show you a chart that I worked up for working these increases so that you can help keep track of your stitches. If that's something that you have a problem with, this chart should be helpful.
So can we no longer use the knit front and back?
So remember when we were talking about the knit front and back last week, I was saying that it is left-handed or left-sided. It comes to the left side of the stitches. I want to demonstrate the make one left and right and the make one left and right purlwise. If you choose to use the the knit front and back. The problem with it now is that you have to involve a stitch as opposed to being outside of the stitch instead of not involving a stitch.
So you would have to knit one and then knit front and back. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So you would have sort of a selvage stitch if we did the knit front and back. And so I am going to do my increases by making one left and right.
Okay.
Now, the pattern calls for making one left and right knitwise and doing a pair of increases and then doing a pair of increases purlwise and then switching back and forth. And I would say for simplification, you could make one left and right. And then in the following plain knit round, you could work it as a knit or a purl. You don't have to make it purlwise if that seems extra super fiddly, because it is extra super fiddly. I
Okay.
mean, make one left and right is fiddly enough, but then to get the purl going is like, so I have a tendency to make one left or right, and then in the following round, I work it as it's supposed to be with the pattern. So just looking at my pattern, here is my, I'm gonna get something less reflective underneath it. Hang on 1 second, get the black. Okay. Right on. So you can see I'm on my right side or the top needle. And now I'm going to switch it over to do the bottom needle. So the way that she had laid it out and wrote very elaborately to work out for that, and I screwed it up, was, and I think I've got yarn around my needle here, so let me fix that. Sorry. Okay. So the beginning of the bottom needle, the 2 edge stitches as she wrote it, you can see are purled. You can see that this is the 2 edge stitches here. They're coming up in the valley of the purl rib. And here's also another purl rib on the other end. So if you make stitches on the outside of these, you want to keep them in pattern. So if the first 2 stitches on the right-hand side are 2 purls, and you're going to make a stitch on the right-hand side of that, it makes sense that you would make 2 knits. So for Natalie and Sandra, having only 1 knit there, you would make another knit before you start. So we have 2 purls. So we're going to make 2 knits on the outside of that. But Natalie and Sandra only have 1 knit, or already have 1 knit. So they're going to start with only making 1 knit before they go to making purls. Does that make sense?
But I have 1 purl.
But then on the other side, you have 1 purl.
No, it's the other way around.
You have 1 purl at the beginning of your bottom needle?
Yes.
Okay, so then you want to make 1 purl at the beginning of because you want to stay in pattern.
So whatever the 1 is, I make another one of that.
Exactly. Which means yours is a little screwed up from the way that she wrote it, but it's still pretty clear. If you can see that you have 2 purls here, that means the next one's going to be a knit. If you have 1 purl here, that means the next one was going to be a purl.
I have a question. Would it do any great damage just to move the beginning of the round over 1 and have 2 purls?
It wouldn't do huge damage, but it might twist your sock a little bit.
And my other question is, I seem to be, the beginning of my round seems to be reverse from yours.
Yeah, so is my,
I turned this over to the bottom needle.
So that means that, yeah, but see, if I do that, then my needles are on, oh,
This is my bottom needle. Are you ready? Are you looking at your bottom needle?
well, it's 1 needle, so.
Okay, are you at the midway point of your round?
No.
Then work to the midway point of your round.
Aha. Okay.
And then we'll be looking at apples and apples. They may
Okay.
not be the same, but we'll be looking at apples and apples.
Okay.
So you're only still increasing 2 stitches per round, correct?
You're only increasing on either side of the bottom of the foot,
One stitch at a time, right?
one stitch at a time, and only on the odd numbered rows.
Aha.
So you want to get your stitches in position so you're ready to work the bottom of the foot.
Oh, okay.
I love looking at the underside of Ingrid's dog's head.
He is not helpful.
He is not helping. Okay, are we all more or less there? Because I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate it.
Could you wait just a half a second?
Well, I'd like to demonstrate it. Why don't you look up and watch,
Okay.
and
Go
we
ahead.
will probably go over it again. So don't fiddle with your knitting right now. Just watch what we're doing, and then we can fiddle in a minute. You can go back to fiddling with your knitting later. So when I'm making one stitch on the beginning, on the bottom needle, with magic loop and with any of our techniques, you can use the left-hand needle to pick up the stitch. So the stitch that I am picking up is the strand of yarn that is attached to the stitch on the left needle, that comes out the base of that stitch and runs to the stitch below the one I've just worked on the other needle. So that's
You say that again? The strand of yarn.
the strand of yarn that I am going to pick up is connected to the stitch on my left needle. It's running through that. If I pull on this, it pulls on the stitch on my left needle.
Okay.
To create a make one left or right, you will always knit or work into the left leg of that stitch. Okay, so if I take this strand and I drape the left leg in front, so that's like having the left needle come from behind under the strand, then I want to knit into the front of that needle, sorry, the front of that stitch, to twist it to the right to make one right. So I show you that again. This is the strand. I drape it, so the left leg of the strand is like a horseshoe, like my cable here, and this is the right leg and this is the left leg. So I want to drape it so the left leg is closest to me to make one right. So here it is, draped over the needle. The left leg of that horseshoe is closest to me. Sometimes I just kind of maneuver it a little bit with my right needle so I can get in there. And if I knit into the left leg of that stitch, it makes one right.
Okay, and now if we ended with a purl, do we do anything different? We have to do a,
So at the beginning of the row, the beginning of this set of stitches, you're always going to make one right.
okay,
And I just said a few minutes ago that I think you should just make one right knitwise and then knit or purl it as it needs to be for this set of stitches in the following round.
okay,
So Sandra, what that looks like is you just want to make a stitch. You just want to put a stitch at the beginning of this round for your increase.
right.
Okay, so now I'm going to work in pattern to the other side. So my pattern here is purl 2. Your pattern is purl 1.
Right.
So you're going to work in pattern to the far side. And then whatever comes next, it doesn't matter. We're just going to make one on the far side. And then we're going to assign it its identity in the following round.
Aha. Okay.
It's like the baby was born, but we don't name it till it's a day old. How's that as an analogy? So when I get to the end of my round, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pick up that strand on the outside that's connected to the stitch that I will have just worked. So I'm finishing the round. It doesn't matter if it's knit or purl. We're not going to worry about that. So here I am at the end. I pick up the top strand between the stitches. But this time when I put it on, I want to put it, or I just picked it up with my left needle. So I went in from the front this time, and that leaves the left half, the left side of the stitch behind my needle, not in front. So I'm going to go into that stitch knitwise, and I'm going to work the left side of the stitch, which means I work it in the back, and that twists the stitch, which is what we're trying to do, and it twists it to the left. So like I said before, to make a twisted stitch, you're always working in the left side of the stitch instead of the right. And it's whether it started in the front and you twist it rightwise for the beginning, or it's in the back and you twist it to the left at the end of the set. Okay, so now we're going to go back and do the top needle. Now, the ribbing pattern is going to change because of what we've done. We are not going to try and match the ribbing pattern to the top needle. The top needle is sort of like the top needle that we did in our last sock. We're not trying to match this to the ribbing. So only the bottom needle stitches have to be in pattern. So we're just working these stitches. It's like we're not paying attention to the bottom needle at all when we're doing the top needle stitches. It doesn't matter what the bottom needle stitches are doing. So when I get to the end of these stitches, not there yet, but getting there. When I get to the end of these stitches and I turn to the other half, I'm going to decide now that it's the second round, whether I'm knitting or purling it. So here we go. I turn, I'm ready to start the second half of the stitches. And I see that I've got knit 2, purl 2, so this should be a knit. Because we don't want 3 purls in a row. So I'm going to knit that first stitch and then continue in pattern to the end. And there's no increases on this because it's an even round. It's the number 2 round. So here's me naming that child. You are a knit stitch. And now I'm going to continue in pattern. So you're establishing the pattern after you've made this in the round after you've made the stitches. Is that clear?
I have one question.
Okay.
I'm still back on the making that last, when you on the bottom and you come to the last stitch, are you making it between the, before, in front of the last stitch, or between the last stitch and the first stitch of the top needle?
Between the last stitch and the first stitch of the top needle.
Okay.
Just like you made it between the last stitch of the top needle and before the
That's
first
what I
stitch.
thought, but I
Yeah.
didn't do that.
So it's a little, so this is symmetric, whereas my make one front and back is not. This is a symmetric increase.
That's not what the pattern tells you to do, though. You know that?
The pattern tells you to make one right.
Right. And the first stitch, before the first stitch.
Before the first stitch, and it tells you to make one left at the end.
Right. So there's no stitch in between.
You pattern to the end of the needle,
Right.
and then you make one left. It is in between the end of the bottom needle and the beginning of the top needle.
Okay, there you go.
That's what I believe that's what Sandra was asking.
Yes.
Okay. We're saying the same thing, different ways. Which is what I'm saying is that that's different than making one in the front and the back. Because that requires that you do it in a stitch. So here I am, I just knit 2, I'm purling 2. So then the last stitch, that the one that I just made, is a knit 1. So that establishes it. So if you begin them, if you make them as a knit stitch, if you don't bother with whether they're knit or purl, you just need to establish what they are in the following round. Is that clear for everybody? Okay. I want to show you how I do a little bit of a chart to keep track of these stitches. And I'm going to use the example of the women's medium and just write it out like I might. I often will get graph paper index cards, and I'll write things like this on them and keep them with my knitting because they're just a little more durable and they can be in my small knitting sock bag. But a piece of paper, a Post-it note, anything will work. So when you begin your increases, you have 30 stitches. And you're going to work 1, 2, 3, 4 rows, or rounds, sorry. For each set of increases, she's written them out as 4 rounds. And you increase on the first stitch, the first round, and the third round. In other words, you always do your increases on the odd numbered rounds. Okay? And it happens that hers are knitwise. So if you are exactly as written, you can put knitwise there. But when you get done with this, you'll have added 2 here and 2 here. So that's +4. So you had 30 when you start, and you'll have +4 when you end. So the next round, you'll start with 34. And it won't be row 4, it will be 5, 6, 7, 8. You'll be doing your increases on rows 5 and 7. Your total number of increases after these 4 rounds will be 4 again, and you'll have 38 stitches. So we keep doing that, 38, and it's rows 9, 10, 11, and 12, plus 4 gives you 42 stitches, 42 stitches in rows 13, 14, 15, 16, that's plus 4 again, so you'll be at 46 stitches. 46 starts up here, 17, 18, 19, 20. You've added 4 more stitches. Now we're at 50. 21, 22, 23, 24. It's 54, and you're supposed to get to 58. So there's one more set, 25, 26, 27, 28, plus 4, and that will get you to 58 stitches. When I do my socks, I write this out like this, and then the underlined row reminds me that that's when I'm going to do my increases. You can separate this off if you want to, but when I do my first sock, I cross off in one direction as I do each one. And then when I do my second sock, I can cross off in the other direction. And then I know I'm doing my shaping in the same way. So if you start with the number that you're beginning at, and you put the total number of increases or decreases, then you can put the number that you're ending at the bottom of the column. And because it's a repeat of a set of rounds, so this is the 4 rounds that you're repeating, however many times you need to do that. So you can see that you need to do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times total. So I find this to be a really handy way to do my increases or decreases, to chart and keep track of them. For people who have 32 stitches already and not 30 or 34, start here as though you have already done the increase. So you'll start counting at round 3 instead of round 1. Then when you reach round 28, do 2 more rounds without shaping to make it the same length. But you really want to do the increases up front. You don't want to go 2 more rounds and then start doing the increasing.
You said 2 extra rounds? Is that what you said?
Yeah, because you're missing rounds 1 and 2.
Right.
So you're going to just do rounds 1 and 2 without shaping at the end.
Okay. Thank you.
I did the same chart for the women's large, men's medium. So that's this chart. And I plan to put both of these up on the website. I don't know of anybody doing any other size, so I'm only putting up women's medium and women's large, and men's small and men's medium. If you're doing another size, tell me now and I will put it up. So you can have your own little, yes, your own little cheat sheet. Is everybody good with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I find this really helpful to have as a way of keeping track of my increases or decreases. We could have done something similar with the increases at the beginning, but they were every other round on both sides. So it was a little bit easier to keep track of, I think. So you'll have a nice clean one up on the website. And then I will also write out a written description of the make one left and right, and put that up there as well. So again, you want to look for that on the Sock 2.0, Sock Club 2.0 page, and it'll be down in step 2. The video will be at the top of the page. Are there any other questions tonight?
When you demonstrated the increases, could we see the front of your sock? Were you saying you don't follow it in pattern, or don't you knit with?
The front of the sock is going to, you're going to be disrupting the ribbing.
All the way across?
No, you're going to be disrupting the ribbing between the front and the top and the bottom of the sock.
Just at the ends, but here it's, you knit on the knit and purl on the purl.
On the top of the sock, you knit on the knit and you purl on the purl.
Okay.
And on the bottom of the sock, you knit on the knit and you purl on the purl.
So it's just at the edges where you're adding.
It's just at the edges, and you should be adding them in pattern,
Okay.
okay? So that's,
Yeah, I have some knitting to do before I'm ready to.
I know, I have to take out the increases now. Because I've still got 2 inches to go.
I felt like I was knitting and knitting and knitting, and then it's nowhere near long enough.
I know, it takes a little bit, and part of that is because we're doing a ribbed pattern. It takes longer in ribbing to work. We do have a little bit of stockinette coming up in the heel. I believe the back of the heel is stockinette, so we'll get a little break, a little tiny break. Next week, I am planning for us to be at the page 6, the heel turn. And then I don't know if we'll get through the heel turn during class. So if we don't, hopefully we will. I'll look at that, because otherwise we'll have to do the heel finishing in the following class and go on to the ankle. I think the heel finishing is where you decrease back down. But
So next week, for those of doing the 60, we should be at 58 stitches on our needles next week. We should finish these 28 rows before next week.
yes, you should be at 58 stitches on the bottom needle only.
Right.
There will still be 30 stitches on your top needle. Your total number of stitches will be 88.
Okay.
For those of you doing the large, the total on your bottom needle only will be 66 plus 34 is 70, 100. Is that right?
70, 100.
34 plus 66 is 100. It is.
Yeah.
It still is. Okay. I should know, I was born in 66. That's the kind of math I've been doing my whole life. And I will put this chart up for everybody for those 2 sizes. I have to go down and argue with a teenager some more. So it'll be later tonight.
Yeah, well,
So it's going great. Situation normal. And I'm glad to see all of you. I hope you're enjoying it. And please unmute yourself and ask a question if you have one. Wasn't sure what that was. Any
Want to teach my
questions?
dog
My
how to knit
husband.
because he wants to have my yarn?
It would be helpful if he would knit it.
Yes.
The front page photo shows the top of the foot as the top needle and the increased rows are the bottom needle. Yes, Karen, I'm sorry, I didn't see your question till just now. The top of the needle is the top of the foot. The bottom needle is the bottom of the foot. So clear as mud. Okay.
Yeah, little toes.
Lily's doing her painting. Okay, is everybody good? I'm gonna
I have
say
a lot
good
of
night,
knitting.
and we're gonna put this video up, and I will see you guys on Monday next week.
Thank you.
Bye,
Right,
Mel.
thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Good night.
We gotta catch, we're
I-
gonna have to catch you another time. We haven't even started yet.
Oh.